Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let's learn. That's what we do here. My name's Connor, if you're new. Episode 9. World War II channel, great channel. Indy Nidell, legend. Let's go. Nothing else to say. Stalin's Murderous Adventures. Terrifying title. Alright, let's get serious. Occupation of Poland, October 27th, 1939. I finally understand why he's always, like, on the phone at the start of every episode, like he's getting the newest information of the week during the war. Love that. Hope everyone's doing well. Let's go.
October 27th, 1939.
Lock in. We're here to learn. If you're not ready to learn, home ec is down the hall. Make me something tasty or sit in the back. Help me learn. Let's go.
Battle for Poland. October 27th, 1939. The battle for Poland is over. The USSR and Germany are in control. The Polish civilians might well think that they can get back to regular daily life just under a new regime. But they are mistaken. Regular daily life no longer exists. I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week saw heroic action on the high seas. It saw Soviet troops enter Estonia. It saw Hitler issuing plans for an attack in Western Europe. And it saw Germany beginning to remove Poles from German-annexed Poland and organizing the first ghetto for the relocation of Jews. It isn't just removal, of course. They need labor, even in the unannexed parts of Poland. On the 25th, the General Government's Labor Department issues a work decree that makes labor mandatory for all Jewish males between 14 and 60 on government-controlled projects. Just by the end of 1939, 28 labor camps for this are built in the Lublin region, 14 near Warsaw, 12 near Krakow, and so on. You are correct in assuming that camp conditions are really harsh, but they are at least a means of survival for the many Jews who have been expelled from their towns, and the pittance they now earn keeps them alive. At the end of the week, a notice posted in Torun kind of shows how the new order in German-controlled Poland is going to work. It is instructions for the Poles. All Poles must leave.
The pittance that they earn? So what does that mean? They have some means of currency when they're in camps?
It is instructions for the Poles. All Poles must leave the pavement free for Germans. At shops or in the marketplace, ethnic Germans and representatives of the German authorities must be served first. Male Poles must tip their hats to state, party, and army personnel. Poles may not use the Heil Hitler greeting. Polish females who annoy German nationals will be sent to brothels. Polish males who annoy women will be seriously punished.
Guys, how much of these rules were also a thing in the occupied regions of World War I? And how much of this is just is new? You know, it's difficult for me to understand the treatment of civilians. I mean, obviously, if you're in a concentration camp, that is, I'm assuming, much worse than most things you could have faced in World War I as a civilian. But to what extent are the similarities?
The final paragraph says this: Poles who have failed to understand that they are the conquered and we are the conquerors, and who act against the above regulations, expose themselves to the most severe punishment. I'd like to point out here that while the conditions for the Poles in the Nazi-occupied parts of Poland are beyond terrible, the situation, looting, killing, and terror is hardly better for them in the Soviet-occupied parts. The Soviet secret police, the NKVD, have already started a campaign of oppression that will see more than 1 million Poles sent to gulags, where many will die. A research paper from Yale University in 1983 concludes, if 1.25 million were incarcerated and deported from the Polish territories during these 21 months, then somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 families remaining on the outside of prisons and forced settlements were directly affected. This amounts to about 1/5 to 1/4 of the entire population residing in the area, which is to say, that everybody at least knew someone who was either deported or imprisoned. Also, beyond any basic or traditional animosity between Russia and Poland, Joseph Stalin has personal grievances and a personal hatred of Poland going back nearly 2 decades. What the Poles refer to as the miracle on the Vistula was their stunning and crushing defeat of the Soviet Red Army at the Battle of Warsaw during the Polish-Soviet War in 1920. Stalin was heavily criticized for his part in that disaster. See,
Okay, but weren't the Germans... Didn't the Germans cause way more trouble than that in World War I when the Russian Tsar, you know, the Russian government collapsed and then Germany took a lot of Russian land? But he's more angry at the Polish than the Germans?
in July 1920, Mikhail Tukhachevsky's offensive had broken through the Polish defenses and by early August threatened not only Warsaw, but Polish independence. Stalin, with his forces, had been advancing in Galicia to the south. Leon Trotsky, in overall charge, orders Stalin to leave Galicia and join Tukhachevsky to take Warsaw. But Stalin wants to secure Galicia first. He refuses to follow Trotsky's order and besieges Lviv, the largest city in southeastern Poland, instead. Tukhachevsky, without him, moves on Warsaw. He does not know that Polish intelligence has decrypted Red Army radio messages, and he is on his way into a trap. He has left only a token force south of Warsaw, guarding the link between the two Soviet fronts. And with Stalin still obsessively clinging to Lviv, this leaves Tukhachevsky's rear exposed. Poland counterattacks on the 14th, and in one day turns the Soviet advance into a retreat. By the 16th, advancing from both Warsaw and the south, the Poles break through the gap between the Soviet forces.
So Stalin hates the Poles because of a mistake that he made in 1920?
On the 18th, they attack the surprise Tukhachevsky's forces from the rear and encircle most of them. The Soviet armies fall into chaos, and entire divisions disintegrate. The Poles soon also outflank and destroy Soviet forces at the Battle of the Niemen River. Russia sues for peace. Poland is safe. And importantly for us in 1939, Stalin failed to take Lviv and was subject to a great deal of criticism for being one of the reasons, if not the reason, that Russia failed to conquer Poland and perhaps even Germany back then.
Okay, so he hates Poland and the Polish because he was being stupid. Is that what I'm getting here?
This didn't sit well with Stalin and served to inflame his hatred of the Poles. Once he was in charge of the Soviet Union, Poles were targeted as spies, especially once the NKVD was reformed as both police and secret police in 1934. Nikolai Yezhov, who became its head in 1936, was especially concerned with imagined Polish conspiracies. And in August 1937, Poles were officially designated enemies of the state. This began an immediate wave of arrests, torture, and executions, which Stalin praised. Very good. Keep on digging out and clean up this Polish filth. Eliminate it in the interests of the Soviet Union. During this anti-Pole campaign, over 140,000 were arrested for espionage and 111,000 were executed. And now, after the events of the past 6 weeks, 5 million Poles...
111,000 were executed?
And now, after the events of the past 6 weeks, 5 million Poles suddenly find themselves under Soviet rule, and that rule is going to be brutal. As for Stalin and Tukhachevsky, Stalin saw him as his worst rival in the post-Lenin and Trotsky years, and already in 1930 plotted to have him removed. This failed, and for the next few years, it was mainly Tukhachevsky who was responsible for modernizing the Red Army. Made Marshal of the Soviet Union in 1935, he was arrested in May 1937, and under torture, directly supervised by Yezhov, confessed that he was a German agent who wanted to seize power. According to Simon Montefiore, this confession survives in the archives and is dotted with a brown spray that was later determined to be blood spatter. Tukhachevsky was convicted of treason and executed. Now, you get into some conspiracies.
So they shot him right after?
stuff here. British historian Robert Conquest in the 1960s said that it was Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich who had forged the documents that implicated Tukhachevsky and managed to secretly leak them so they came to Stalin's attention. Then in 1989, the Politburo of the Soviet Union's Communist Party itself said it had new evidence. It was Stalin and Yezhov who had come up with Tukhachevsky's treason themselves and had managed to secretly leak the information to Heydrich in the first place. Heydrich, as director of the SD, the SS's intelligence agency, thought that they had fooled Stalin into executing not just Tukhachevsky, but a bunch of his best generals. But in reality, they'd been just a pawn.
What? So let me get this. So maybe I should. So he leaked stuff to the Germans, hoping that they would then leak it back to them so that then they could claim a justified Tukhachevsky
of Joseph Stalin. In an article in Life magazine in the 1950s, a Soviet defector said that some NKVD agents had discovered in the old Tsarist secret police archives that Stalin had once been an informer. These agents had planned a coup with Tukhachevsky and company, which Stalin had learned of, so he and Yezhov had set about to destroy those planning the coup. We still maybe don't know what truly happened here, but Stalin had always harbored a hatred for military officers. Even back when he was
if I would just not pause and just listen, I'm sorry.
reality, they'd been just a pawn of Joseph Stalin. In an article in Life magazine in the 1950s, a Soviet defector said that some NKVD agents had discovered in the old Tsarist secret police archives that Stalin had once been an informer. These agents had planned a coup with Tukhachevsky and company, which Stalin had learned of, so he and Yezhov had set about to destroy those planning the coup. We still maybe don't know
anything
what truly
could
happened
be
here.
true.
But Stalin had always harbored a hatred for military officers, even back when he was commanding an army in the Russian Civil War. He'd use pretty much any pretext to have officers arrested or executed. And realistically, in the 1930s, only the Red Army could have curbed his ambitions for absolute power. So Stalin and Yezhov orchestrated the execution of thousands of Red Army officers after Tukhachevsky, including 5 of the 8 generals who presided over his trial in the Red Army purges. These were just part of the Great Purges of 1937 and 1938, as was Yezhov's persecution of Poles I mentioned, which led to as many as 1 million deaths in the Soviet Union. As for Yezhov,
I'm surprised that people still wanted to be in high-ranking positions in the Soviet government or in military leadership, just knowing possibly even if you were innocent that you could just be snuffed out at any moment in a horrible way.
like so many others before him, he fell from Stalin's favor and he was arrested in April this year. He has by now confessed to multiple crimes against the Soviet Union and is currently awaiting trial. He was succeeded as head of the NKVD last November by Lavrentiy Beria.
He kind of looks like Putin.
Someone else is plotting against Stalin this week, though. In a secret speech to some Nazi Party officials on the 21st, Adolf Hitler tells them that once Britain and France are defeated, he will turn his attentions eastward and show the Russians who is the real master. But can they, or can anyone, master new science? In September, German scientists had told the military that there was a theoretical possibility to use nuclear fission to create a bomb of awesome destructive power. But back on October 11th, Alexander Sachs, a friend of Albert Einstein, brought a letter he'd received from Einstein to American President Franklin Roosevelt. The letter said that atomic energy would allow man to destroy his neighbor on an unimaginable scale. This week, the first meeting of an advisory committee on uranium is held in Washington. America is going to actively seek out that bomb. And as we come to the end of another week of the war, Belgium declares its neutrality. There are Jews being sent to labor camps, Poles being officially designated second-class citizens, well, if they were even citizens at all, and Hitler's future dreams against the Russians. And men thinking about an ultimate weapon. Because something like carving up Poland wasn't enough. Hundreds of thousands of dead or soon-to-be dead civilians wasn't enough. Not if you make them subhuman in your mind. Those 6 weeks of battle were just too much effort when you think you could have instead used an ultimate weapon and killed everyone all at once. How awesome would that be? If you'd like to know more about the Polish-Soviet War, you can click right here for our Between Two Wars episode about that. Please support us at patreon.com or timegoes.tv. It is your support that is what finances this show. See you next time.
Okay. So it seems like a lot, and this is the case, I guess, in any moment in history. You know, no moment in history is in a vacuum. You know, it's always attached to something that came before it. But it really seems like a lot of the atrocities and killings and, you know, subhuman classification and random came from a lot of animosity from the post-World War I time period. Whether it was Germany feeling like it was wronged or punished too much, or whether it was the Soviets after the Russian Revolution with the Polish, who they thought, even though, I mean, that was your own fault, Stalin, that you were too dumb to move your troops a bit, and then the Polish took advantage. How dare you take advantage of my bad move? And that's terrifying, and it is a lesson that what has happened in the past, people will remember it, and if they get in charge, they will turn around and do horrible things. And that's a terrifying realization. Very interesting, very terrifying, but hey, we're learning about World War II. There's going to be terrifying, horrific things. So, love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.